Alright, how you guys doing today? This is Mr. Muscarella coming at you, and today we're taking a look at how to find coterminal angles using degrees. There'll be a separate video on finding coterminal angles using radians, so be sure to check out that one as well. Now the first thing we actually need to do is figure out what the heck are coterminal angles. And generally speaking, they're angles that have the same location. Another way to think about it is angles that have the same initial side and terminal side. Now let's kind of define what the initial side are and terminal side in case you forget. The initial side, that's usually going to be on the x-axis, and the terminal side is going to be where the angle stops, where the angle terminates. Now, in order to get to the terminal side, there's kind of a couple of directions we can go. We can either move in a positive direction or a negative direction. Now, if we're going to move in a positive direction, I'm just going to generally call my angle out here. I'm just going to call this theta. In order to get to theta, if I wanted to move in a positive direction, I could just go right there from the x-axis. Or I could continue all the way around another 360 degrees from that spot and get there as well. Or I could keep going around and around and around again and still end up at that same spot. So I could get there just by revolving in a circular motion around and around and around. And every time you make one revolution, you should know that that's 360 degrees. Now that's if we move in a positive direction. But if theta was up here still, I could still get to that spot by moving in a negative direction around to that terminal side. Or I could keep going around again and end up at that spot, or I could go around one more time and get to that spot. Oh gosh, this is looking gross. Ugh. When you guys take calculus later on, you'll learn about something called slope fields, which will kind of sort of look like this. So more on that in that course. What I want you to get out of this is that to get to a certain location, you could either move in a positive direction or you could move in a negative direction. And every time you move, you're going to add 360 degrees or you might subtract 360 degrees depending on which way you go. Now very often you'll find something like this. It says find positive and negative angles that are coterminal to 60 degrees. Now we're going to kind of get after this visually here a little bit to start with. And 60 degrees, if we draw a picture of that, we know that that's going to be somewhere up here in quadrant number 1. Now, to get to 60 degrees in a positive direction, I would just start at the x-axis and go upwards in that direction. Now, I could also go around again, and so I could get to that spot by adding another 360 degrees to it. So if I add 360 to 60, I get a grand total of 420. So 60 degrees and 420 degrees are coterminal angles. But wait, maybe I wanted to keep going more. So then I go around another 360 degrees. So if I add 360 to 420, then I'm at a grand total of 780 degrees. So then I would be at another spot. So 60, 420, 780, all of those, all coterminal angles. And if you wanted to go around again, you could add another 360 degrees, in which case you would be at 1,140 degrees. So all of those are coterminal angles to 60 degrees. They're also coterminal with each other. 420 degrees and 780 degrees are coterminal angles. Any number in that group, any pair of numbers in there are coterminal to each other. Now the other thing I could do is move in a negative direction. And if we move in a negative direction, that means we're going to start at the x-axis and we're going to move in a clockwise direction. Now if we did that, we start out with 60 degrees, but then we're going to subtract 360 degrees. And as long as you can do your arithmetic well, you should end up with negative 300. So negative 300 is another coterminal angle. But say I wanted to go around and around one more time to get to that same location. Well, I just made one more revolution or went around another 360 degrees in a negative direction. So that would give me a total of negative 660 degrees. So negative 660 degrees is another coterminal angle. And if you wanted to go around one more time because you were really bored, whoop, 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 and there you are, so you'd subtract 360 degrees again, and finally you're at negative 1,020 degrees. So all of these angles are coterminal. Any pair of them is going to have a certain pattern. And what I want you to do is see if you can figure out that pattern. And to take a look at that pattern, we're going to kind of do this simple operation. So here's this pattern that I want you to see if you can pick up on. It's pretty straightforward. The difference of any two coterminal angles is a multiple of 360. So what that means, if you took any two of them, say 60, and you subtracted negative 300, your result, when you do that arithmetic, you're going to get 360, which obviously is a multiple of 360. But say you did 420 minus that negative 300 degrees. Those two angles, if you find their difference, you get 720, which is another multiple of 360. So any pair of those two of coterminal angles will always have a difference that is a multiple of 360. So that's one way you can look at numbers to see if they are coterminal angles, because sometimes textbooks will give you questions like that. So let's actually go ahead and practice this idea right now. So here's a problem you'll typically see that'll go something like this. Which angles are coterminal with negative 50 degrees? So what I like to do to get started is I like to actually write out the multiples of 360, just so I kind of have them down. So one of them obviously is positive 360. And likewise, you'll have a negative 360. So I'll just write that as plus or minus. Negative plus or minus, if I added 360 to that, I'd get 720. If I added 360 again, I'd get 1080. Another 360 will put me at 1440. So what I want to do is check each one of these, A, B, C, and D, those numbers, to see if the difference of negative 50 with that number is positive or negative 360, 720, 1080, and 1440. And if it is, then yes, that's going to be a coterminal angle, and we'll be happy. If not, we just move along then. So let's take a look at A. If I have negative 50 and I subtract negative 310, that gives me a total of 260 degrees, which is obviously not a multiple of 360. Moving on to B. If I have negative 50 and I subtract 1030, I will have a grand total of negative 1080, which is a multiple of 360. Whoop, whoop. So yeah, answer B is a correct choice. Now let's move on to choice C. So for choice C, if we have negative 50 and we subtract 310 degrees, if we add that up, we get negative 360. And oh my gosh, look at that! That's pretty easy to see. That's another multiple of 360. Let's see if D works. Now for D, we get negative 50 minus negative 770. If I add that up or subtract that, the difference of those two numbers is 720. Oh my gosh, look at that! That's another multiple of 360. Wow, so we've got 3 winners out of this group of 4. So all 3 of those angles, 1030, 310, and negative 770, are all coterminal with negative 50 degrees. Well, that's it for this video. Hopefully by now you understand how to find angles that are coterminal when working with degrees. Thanks for watching, and you guys have a great day. Peace out.